You can put your prayer books aside. If you won't injure your neighbor, you can stretch a little. It's not that long. A story. Itzik was a simple man living in a simple village. He was a man who was loved by God and devoted to his life and to the care of his synagogue and family and community. Each morning he worked as a baker. Each afternoon he spent time with his family. And each evening he went to the synagogue to study and to clean the tiny sanctuary. One evening, as he was straightening up, Itzik heard a faint cry coming from within the ark. When he opened the doors, he was almost blinded by the brightest light that he had ever seen. A soft voice came out from within the light and said, "I am an angel, a messenger from God, and I have come to offer you one wish." "A wish? For me? Why me?" And the angel said, "The heavens have taken note of how dedicated and kind you are, and you are being given one wish as a reward for your good heart. I will return tomorrow night, and you will tell me what it is that you desire." And so the rest of the night and the rest of the day, Itzik pondered his choices. When the sun went down, he closed his books, picked up a broom, and began to clean the shul. Right on schedule, the light appeared in the cracks of the ark. Itzik opened the doors, and the angel said, "Have you decided on your wish?" With quivering voice, Itzik responded, "This has not been easy. First, I wanted to ask for money. With it, I could buy fancy clothes and expensive meals, and of course, donate a large sum to tzedakah. But then I realized that although I am a simple baker, I have enough money to buy clothes and enough to feed my family, and we have a small but loving house, and I give what I can to tzedakah now. And so I do not want to ask for money because though I am not rich, I am comfortable. And then I was going to ask for fame, because it would be nice to be famous. Everyone would know who I am. But fame is fleeting, and the truth is, I am needed right where I am in this town, in my family, in my community. And that is really all I need. I'm comfortable with that. And then I thought of asking for wisdom. But I spend every day reading the text of our tradition, and if I was suddenly wise, what need would I have to study? I would miss that. And so, although I know I'm not the smartest person, even in this village, I am comfortable with that. So, dear angel, after all my thinking and pondering, what I wish for is nothing. I do not need money or fame or wisdom. I am comfortable with who I am and what I do. And since I do not need anything, I will not wish for anything. God has blessed me with all that I need. Thank you, but no thank you. So I want to pause the story for a minute. We'll come back to it. But I want us to think for a moment about Itzik's response. This man, who is not well off by any means, takes an honest look at his life and realizes that although there is plenty that he lacks, he can honestly say that he is comfortable, that he has enough. Enough is an important spiritual word these days, because we live in a society that constantly tries to convince us that we are, in fact, not young enough, not rich enough, not smart enough, not strong enough, not enough recognition or followers or friends. Stanford professor Dr. James R. Doty writes, "Why is it in a country that consumes 25% of the world's resources, is there an epidemic of loneliness, depression, and anxiety? Why do so many in the West who have all their basic needs met still feel impoverished?" Unless we think that this is solely a modern problem, I'll reference back to the Midrash written almost 2,000 years ago, where the rabbi said, "The one who has 100, he wants 200. And the one who has 200, he wants 400. We are comfortable. We have enough, but it doesn't feel that way. So we set up our lives trying to acquire what we think we lack. It is an exhausting way to live, and I would say not the best example to set for children, as it sets them up for a lifetime of never knowing what actual satisfaction and contentment feel like. In Pirkei Avot, Ben Zoma asks, "Ezehu Ashir," who is rich? It's a simple question, but his answer may not be what you think. He doesn't point to the wealthiest person in the town or the one who has donated the most to tzedakah or the shul. Who is rich, he asks, and he answers, it is the one who finds happiness with what he has. Not the person who actually has everything, but the person who feels like she has everything. What would it take for you to feel like you have enough, like you are enough? Not just to say the words because you think that you should, but to really feel it. That question is one of the reasons that we come to the synagogue during these holy days, to ask that question of ourselves. Because it is here in the synagogue where we find respite from the messages of do more, be more, acquire more, that we constantly receive outside these walls. Here we can listen to words of prayer that instill in us a sense of gratitude. We can sing blessings that remind us that we, as we are enough. We bring food to share with the hungry, tzedakah to help those in need. We sit with community in sacred space and take time to recalibrate and appreciate the abundance that is ours. Okay, back to the story. So, as soon as Itzik told the angel that he was comfortable and not in need of any wish, the light went out in the ark and the angel disappeared. But as soon as he picked up his broom, he heard another voice. This time it was coming from the back of the shul. There, he saw his beloved Rebbe, and the Rebbe was crying. Itzik asked what the rabbi was doing there, and the rabbi told him that he had seen the entire encounter with the angel. And Itzik threw his shoulders back and stood up a little straighter, ready to be praised by the rabbi for his great humility. Instead, the rabbi kept crying. Finally, he dried his eyes and said, "Itzik, you were given a gift, any wish that you wanted, and it would have been fulfilled. You could have wished for an end to hunger, and no one on this planet would go to bed without food in their bellies tonight. You could have wished for an end to war, and the nations would have had to have beaten their spears into plowshares. You could have wished for an end to prejudice, and no one would be made to feel like they were the stranger ever again. It's if you could have changed the world, but you were comfortable. You could have given the world a chance at becoming the world it wants to be. But Itzik, You passed it by because you were comfortable. Now, I want to go out on a limb and say that the majority of us in this room are living pretty comfortable lives. Not perfectly happy lives, nor perfectly healthy lives. Not always easy lives, but comfortable lives. Comfort means that we have options, including the option of turning away from the suffering of others when it starts to feel like it's too much. And we have certainly been overwhelmed by our share of suffering this year. But then Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur come along. These holidays are holy interruptions in our otherwise comfortable lives. On these days, we come together to look within, to look honestly at who we have become, and to dream again about who we would like to be for ourselves and ultimately who we wish to be for one another. As we come together to look at the world around us, asking how we have experienced and ultimately what we have done to mend the ever-growing brokenness within our world. Thinking just about this past year, we and our families have experienced job loss or health crises or increased anxiety and depression with our teens, or obligations and burdens of caring for aging parents, just to name a few. Sometimes we receive support in these challenges, but most often we are dealing with them on our own. And then we turn and look out the windows to the world around us, where we have been witnesses to fear and suffering of our African American brothers and sisters as they struggle to open our nation's eyes to the devastating effects systemic racism plays in their lives each day. And a refugee crisis, the likes of which we have not seen since World War II, and our nation doing all it can to shut out immigrants fleeing unimaginable persecution. And dreamers and their families living in fear of deportation. And members of the trans community whose civil rights have been curtailed, and a woman's right to choose under attack. And shifting weather patterns, and devastating hurricanes, and rising sea levels, and still our country announces that it will pull out of the Paris Climate Accord. And the economic gap between rich and poor growing each day, and 43 million Americans, 13.5% of our country living below the poverty line. And of course, this year, a significant uptick in anti-Semitic incidents, from bomb threats to Charlottesville, to the recent hashtag of Gas the Synagogue trending on Twitter, directed at CRC here in St. Louis when they opened their doors to protesters just 2 weeks ago. With each new occurrence, we might feel outrage. We might shake our fists, post something on Facebook, perhaps even call our representatives or write a letter to the editor. But then we fall back into comfort and complacency weeks or days or even hours later when the news cycle moves on to its next big story. The problems seem too large for us to tackle on our own, and so we fall back into comfort, into acceptance of the status quo, no matter how hard we try. Great Britain's former chief rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, writes, "In Judaism, faith is not acceptance, it is protest. Protest against the world that is, in the name of the world that is not yet, but ought to be. Protest against a world that is harder for the most vulnerable. Protest against the very belief that we are powerless to make a change." Now, the truth is, We are pretty powerless to make impactful, lasting change if we are working separately, individually, all on our own. But together, that's a different story. Rabbi Stephanie Collin writes, "Congregations are communities who pray together, celebrate together, grieve together, feed the hungry together, and study Torah together. Imagine what we could do together to address the shared challenges we each face and to impact the most pressing issues of our day. Imagine us, 1,000, 2,000 strong, working together and in coalition with other groups in the city, bringing the world a bit closer to the way it ought to be." This kind of work is important, of course, and does not happen overnight. It takes time to build and figure out, but it can happen. And it starts, I just want to take you back to the very beginning of our service. It starts when we begin to turn toward each other, seeing one another, really seeing each other, and listening to each other, and hearing each other's stories. This is exactly what our congregation is planning to do together this year. I know that you've heard bits about it from Rabbi Bennett and Rabbi Zinn. What I want you to really know is that there has been a team of about 35 amazing Sher Emeth members who have been preparing for this initiative, where we will begin by having 500 face-to-face conversations over the next 2 months. These conversations will happen in house meetings or one-on-one settings where we will share what matters to us most, what keeps us up at night with worry, what breaks our hearts, what do we want to work on together, and how can Jewish tradition guide us in our ways of doing what is right. We begin with these face-to-face sharings of stories because in doing so, face-to-face, we can recognize how much pain and joy and courage we have in common. Through story, we can admit to helplessness that we feel when we encounter brokenness in ourselves or our loved ones or our community. And through story, we allow resolve to flourish. Because once I sit with you and I see you and I hear what breaks your heart or what matters to you most, I become responsible for you in ways that were impossible before. These 500 stories, your stories, will help us make a determination about which particular issue we will address first. And then we will join with other communities in St. Louis who share our vision of the world as it ought to be. What is it that we will do? I can't tell you yet because I don't know your stories yet. What I can tell you is that in congregations similar to ours all across the country who have taken on this model of justice seeking, they have been able to create significant changes in their communities and in themselves. In Boston, one congregation worked with local school districts to increase the availability of mental health services to their anxiety-riddled, stress-to-the-limit student population. In New York, congregations came together working in partnerships with other schools to open a new public school in the city to help alleviate overcrowding in classrooms. In Cleveland, there is a synagogue who, along with other faith communities, has brought law enforcement officers and community members together to improve policy and build trust. We call this effort Justice at the Center, and there are a number of ways for you to be involved. You can begin this afternoon by joining in small groups for these face-to-face conversations. And if you can't stay this afternoon, that's fine. When you receive a phone call from another member of the congregation who calls you and invites you and says, please come to a house meeting at my house. It will take 90 minutes. We want to hear your story. Say yes. And if you want to host a house meeting, say yes too. Right outside the synagogue doors, when the service ends, really in just moments, Mary Ann Chervitz, who is a member of our team, our leadership team, is going to be sitting at a table outside. You can just sign up with your name and contact information. If you want to be invited, if you want to host, or if you just want to learn more, we will call you, contact you, and be in touch. Our holy days present us with a complex spiritual challenge this year. On the one hand, we must open our eyes to the blessings that surround us and practice gratitude for all that we have and curb our desires for more. On the other hand, we cannot allow ourselves to grow so comfortable that we abdicate our responsibilities to our neighbors, fellow community members, and especially the stranger in our midst. This year, there are important justice battles to be fought and won. This year, in your community, there are opportunities to change the world. Let's not let our comfort keep us from bringing the world as it is just a bit closer to the world as it ought to be. That is our task in this new year. This new year, now more than ever, we are extending an invitation. Please say yes. Shana Tova. But we're almost ready. We're almost ready. Okay. Yom Kippur is the day that never ends. No, the service technically never ends. So, we don't have concluding prayers in the Yom Kippur morning service because the entire day is devoted to contemplation and study and prayer. At 1 o'clock, there are opportunities to do so. Please join us if you can and begin sharing your stories. You can learn with Rabbi Stiffman, Rabbi Bennett, Bob Cohn. At 3 o'clock, we will return to this space for our afternoon Yom Kippur service. And then at 4:30 is our Yizkor and Nila service where we will end the day together. I want to express deep, deep gratitude to all who participated in our service today. The people who carried our Torahs, John Kalishman, Aaron Bennett, what an amazingly beautiful job you did in chanting Torah for us this morning. And the choir and musicians, it's just beautiful. And of course to Cantor Seth for bringing it all together. I wish everyone here an easy fast, a good Yontif, a good Shabbos, and blessings in this new year. Amen.